When hearing the words Atlus, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Is it the incredible characters? Maybe it's the fleshed out and evolving worlds. It could be their engaging narratives, possibly the incredible music, or maybe even the remarkable gameplay loop. Whether you're playing SMT5 Vengeance or Persona 5, you're in for a good time. Yet, whenever you recommend or are recommended an Atlus game, it's commonly followed by the game starts out slow. Whether it's long-form video essays, articles from major outlets, or recommendations from friends, many of Atlus's games appear to be plagued with some monotonous opening hours, and I'm no stranger to this criticism either. In past videos, I've criticized many of their games for having slow and long openings. I usually make a remark about this and the pacing and just kind of move on, but today is different. Rather than providing a surface level criticism of their openings, I'd like to do a deep dive on them and see where they succeed, fail, in areas where they can improve, and why critiquing their openings is much more complicated than I initially thought. Before getting into it, I want to make something very clear. This video is highly subjective. Everyone has different tastes, plays games differently, and enjoys unique aspects of them. Just because I don't enjoy platformers, looter shooters, and MOBAs as much as other genres doesn't mean that they're bad. And just because an opening fails to grab me doesn't mean it won't grab you or that the opening's bad. It's important to be open-minded when having these discussions because it's mostly subjective here. With that said, let's identify the unique hurdles video game intros must cross. Since their genesis, video games have been an interactive form of entertainment. Player input is a focal point of all games. Whether you're playing a visual novel or a platformer, player interaction is paramount for deriving pleasure from this medium. In an attempt to avoid stagnation and because creatives are, well, creative, different genres and mechanics were created. At their core, mechanics are what makes video games video games. Without player input, they'd be no different than movies, TV shows, anime, or books, unless you consider flipping pages an immersive experience. Mechanics and story to an extent create a lot of excitement and anticipation. Whether you're moving in a fighting game, shooting in an FPS, or mid-maxing in an RPG, a majority of the game's runtime will be spent doing these actions. Eventually, you'll find yourself in a flow or just playing something to play it until you're snapped out of it with a cutscene. When a cutscene is introduced, players are removed from the core experience. Much like mechanics, the transition between gameplay to cutscenes and vice versa is a dynamic that only exists in gaming. TV shows, anime, and movies have the luxury of requiring no interaction. If you're watching or reading, you're getting the most out of them. The metaphorical tug-of-war between gameplay and narrative is a unique issue game developers are cognizant of. While some are satisfied with taking full control away from players, others are hesitant. Removing us from the gameplay loop too often can be detrimental to the overall experience. Due to this balance, exposition, dialogue, character development, and other world-building tactics, developers must be deliberate when removing players from this experience, and I believe RPGs are disproportionately affected by this. RPGs, but especially JRPGs, are mechanically rich games, often featuring a dense and lengthy onboarding process. Upon booting up Persona 5, we're introduced to the One More combat system, the calendar system, meet several party members specializing in certain areas, discover equipment, personas, fusing personas, the compendium, side quests, social links, social stats, and more. And if this sounds like a lot, it's because it is. Something series veterans tend to do is ignore how much time they've sunk into a franchise. For example, how many people have you heard say Persona 5 is too easy? I'd imagine a lot of people, so let's dig a little bit deeper. If you're someone who claims that this game is easy, was Persona 5 your first Persona game? And if the answer is no, I'd implore them to remember how their first playthrough went. Now, I know it sounds like I'm picking on Persona fans, but this occurs in pretty much every long-running fandom. This is exceptionally bad in the Souls community, but I think you get the point by now. The institutional knowledge and experience players bring may dilute them from the new player experience, and if you don't believe me, I'll be the first to say it. Persona 5 was my first Atlus game in 2016. I had a hard time towards the end, and I'm fairly confident this isn't a unique experience. And it probably would have been even worse if Atlus didn't ease me into the Persona gameplay loop. And don't lie to me, at some point we were all overwhelmed with the sheer volume of stuff to do in this system. JRPGs each have their own unique systems and quirks we have to be eased into. I know everyone points at the baptism by fire approach rejuvenated by FromSoft's success, but there's a reason most Dark Souls video essays are introduced with a soliloquy about learning to love the game after 3 attempts. This lengthy onboarding process is a symptom of RPG's mechanically dense nature. When comparing Persona 5's intro to something like Remedy's Control or Konami's Silent Hill F, which I'm planning to discuss in the future, the differences are night and day. Rather than creating your mechanics and gradually distilling them throughout the opening hours, Control introduces the main character, this mysterious setting, the major conflict, the map, and the core gameplay loop in less than 10 minutes. RPGs simply can't do this, developing an entire world for us to explore while sprinkling tutorials and moments to actually play the game is quite challenging. Like I said earlier, going from story to tutorial to gameplay back to story is really hard to do effectively. It hurts the overall pacing and threatens to remove you from the experience. And if this sounds challenging, welcome to game development. I'm sure there are other challenges they encounter, but these are some of the concepts that you have to consider when making games. Balancing these elements is one of the reasons I've softened my criticism of Atlus's openings, but I still might be in the minority here. When Metaphor ReFantazio released last year, various news outlets and I were critical of its opening hours. Instead of repeating this talking point or providing this surface level criticism, I want to revisit Metaphor's opening hours through an editorial lens to see where we can improve it. If you're curious why I'm picking on Metaphor, it's one of Atlus's newest games and a brand new IP for them. Metaphor was an opportunity for them to experiment and try something new. Initially, I wanted to pick apart Persona 4's opening hours, but those hours have been beaten to death by the community. I can probably get away with calling Persona 4's opening hours rough without a video explaining myself anyways. I'm also working on my Persona 4 retrospective, and I'd rather have all my thoughts in one place, so be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in that. Anyways, let's take Metaphor from the top. Before pressing new game, we're greeted with an opening prologue. We see two creatures participating in what appears to be bribery, followed by a homeless person getting kicked. Within seconds, it's clear that this dark fantasy world may be filled with corruption. The scene cuts to this tower before the camera pans to a man staring at the city through a window. He calls this land grotesque, criticizing an old man with no life in his eyes. Approaching with a dagger, the mysterious creature tells the old man him and his dreams should have died a long time ago before murdering him. With the old man grabbing air and life quickly fading from his eyes, he dies. The following scene finds his royal advisor speculating who killed him, who's going to be his successor, and whether a civil war will break out as they surround his corpse. Approaching from the shadows, Lewis, the mysterious man, asks who's going to wield the royal scepter and take the throne. As the scene fades to black, we see a mysterious book introduced with a strange narrator. The author alludes to the inevitable race to the throne and provides exposition about the world. He outlines shortcomings found throughout the world like discrimination, prejudice, inevitable war, and systemic oppression under the current monarchy. Before ending the prologue, the author fantasizes about this utopia where an educated society provides equal opportunity and a republic in which law governs its citizens. Now, I can't stress enough how powerful and captivating this prologue is. Watching someone take part in bribery, a homeless person getting kicked, and Lewis's commanding glare over the city before murdering the king draws immediate interest. Hoshino and the team succinctly establish Metaphor's identity and themes within the first 5 minutes. You're not in Japan, you're not a high schooler, and this isn't a story about discovering yourself. Instead, you're in this dark fantasy world residing under an oppressive secular system with no hope. Some believe in a fantasy world which clearly mirrors our reality. The use of fantasy in Metaphor's world is meant to transform these fictional characters' struggle into something that we can sympathize with. When revisiting this prologue, it's hard to describe it as anything other than captivating, and this momentum would continue after selecting new game. Metaphor immediately greets us with a fourth wall break. Our presence is acknowledged, our name is requested, and our stance on fantasy is assessed. In the grand scheme of things, fourth wall breaks are always kind of tricky, especially in RPGs. RPGs pride themselves on creating these immersive dynamic worlds. Completing side quests lead to others. Not interacting with NPCs may cause them to feel neglected, and other cause and effect mechanics sustain the illusion of an evolving world. When games speak directly to us without an analog to do so, it can sometimes feel like we're getting pulled out of the experience. It's a reminder that we're playing a game instead of being engrossed in a real place. Ultimately, it's an interesting thing to do since our avatars are put directly into the game. After this section, we find ourselves headed somewhere before being stopped by a group of Lewis extremists. By the time we're jumped, Lewis, a mysterious red-headed woman, one of Metaphor's core themes, this recurring book, and our mission are established. Before reaching the royal capital, Gallica, the main character's guide, asks us if we remember the mission, and the answer is the same regardless of our choice. This is probably one of my biggest nitpicks and something that bothers me in every game, but what's up with this illusion of choice? If you reply yes, Gallica reminds us of the mission, and if you reply no, Gallica reminds us of the mission. Like, why is this even a question? If you want to recap the mission, allude to anxiety, and play some music for us, just go for it, but What's the point of asking this question when both answers are no? After exploring the desert, joining a pilgrimage to the Grand Tread, and arriving at the capital, it's smooth sailing from here outside of this flashback. This flashback explains the political crisis with the prince cursed, why you're joining the military, and your mission. This scene provides some other additional context like the prince being cursed for a decade, and presents the dire situation they're in. It's a great flashback providing additional context to our actions. So, why am I talking about this scene? Well, 5 minutes earlier, if you recall, Gallica provides a surface level explanation of our mission. If this flashback, which explains our mission, is less than 10 minutes away, then other than the music, what's the point of this cutscene? Again, I know this sounds like a massive nitpick over like a 2 or 3 minute long cutscene, but scenes like these are what people mean by the writing feeling bloated. And while this criticism may sound harsh, allow me to ask you a question. If this cutscene with Gallica was removed, what does the story risk losing? In my opinion, absolutely nothing. Can you imagine if Gallica warned us about the dangers of the Grand Tread, reminded us that violence was common in the capital, and or further alluded to the stagnation between the races here instead of providing a surface level introduction to the mission? The sky is the limit here, and we can take this one step further with the precedent it established. Do you think scenes like this can be found throughout the game? Sprinkling redundant conversations like these throughout the lengthy runtime may introduce long-term pacing ramifications. And just so we're clear, I'm not saying scenes like these ruin the game or anything, but they undeniably add to the runtime. If you can remove a scene from a story and it still makes sense, then why does it exist? And what does its inclusion seek to gain? Like everything, there's definitely some nuance here though. Regardless, I believe this scene could have been repurposed or removed since the flashback accomplishes everything it set out to do. Anyways, joining the military, meeting Stroll, reading the fantasy novel with Gallica, arriving at the fort, exploring it, awakening your archetype, meeting Grius, and Grius explaining who Lewis is and why he's so terrifying are great. Say what you want about overcoming the monster or the hero's journey archetypes, but they're always an effective way of setting up a story. Grius paints Lewis as this unstoppable force and genius tactician who understands the politics of the world. Born as a natural prodigy, he's climbed his way to the top as one of the king's royal advisors. Possessing one of the sharpest minds in the world, unafraid of getting his hands dirty, and willing to do whatever it takes to see his vision become reality, Lewis is this terrifying antagonist. So, what does this have to do with the opening? Literally nothing, honestly. Lewis is just one of Atlus's best antagonists, and I don't think he gets enough praise. Moving along, we speak with Mor in our dreams and quickly find ourselves in the Nord Mines. There are two areas I'd like to highlight here, the Klinger reveal and the ride back to the Grand Tread with Stroll and Grius. Whether we're watching the prologue, the animated cutscene when arriving in the capital, speaking with NPCs, or hearing from the narrator, we're told that this world is riddled with discrimination and deception. Metaphor does an exceptional job of showing this or having characters share their traumatic experiences. My favorite example of this can be found with Captain Klinger's army conspiracy. Klinger is one of the captains who interviewed us for the military. Military and conflict are often affiliated with pride, nationalism, and propaganda. Defending your country, protecting your values, and/or military benefits are common tactics used by soldiers to recruit others. After joining the military, and with minimal training might I add, you're sent to the battlefield until one of the fort's guards arrives and passes out. Everyone's scared for their lives, wants to leave, but Klinger says the guard is no place for cowards, imploring us to fight with pride. Filled with honor and duty, everyone pushes towards the fort. The fort is riddled with corpses and soldiers fighting what appears to be a human. As you explore the fort, you'll discover dead soldiers and dogs. Reaching the top, you're encountered by a Homo Gorlio, quickly overpowered, awaken your archetype, fight back, save Stroll, meet Grius, hit the bonfire, and make your way to the Nord Mines before coming across Klinger. Stroll confronts him as he was the only person who didn't go into the fort. Klinger admits he was aware that a human was there and wanted to demonstrate how powerless the kingdom's guard was. Stroll accuses him of treason and being in league with Lewis to further weaken the king's image. We also get to experience cinema as Stroll's honorable nature is fully revealed with his archetype awakening. The reason I spent a few minutes going over Klinger's plan was to demonstrate how effective show don't tell is. Think of it like your parents warning you about not touching fire. It's one thing to watch someone get burned or hear about someone getting burned, but experiencing this firsthand is traumatizing. A bureaucratic institution governed by the king is capable of seditious acts. We found ourselves as pawns in Lewis's political game and witness how little life actually means to him and Klinger. This conspiracy in the opening hours, alongside the captivating prologue, effectively sets the tone of Metaphor. Lewis is poised to leverage every institutional advantage he has to enact his will. This conspiracy hauntingly solidifies Metaphor's world as we narrowly escape death. And suddenly, all the stories that we've heard about the world and weight of the events putting the plot into motion become terrifying. We've been burnt, we've been used, and only we can make it right. After defeating Klinger and escaping the tunnel, Stroll reflects on Klinger burning his town to the ground and promises to help you take down Lewis around the bonfire. We also get to experience how the prince was poisoned and see a familiar redhead. Grius finally reveals how they believe Lewis is behind the king's curse and believes assassinating him will lift it. Although I wouldn't change anything here, I can't say the same about the carriage ride back to the Grand Trad. On our way back to the capital, everyone has a chat where they summarize everything that just happened. As a friendly reminder, these events went down like 3 hours ago. We've seen the prologue, experienced the world's discrimination, learned about Stroll's upbringing, saw the prince get cursed, and were sent to our deaths as part of Lewis's conspiracy. Metaphor very clearly demonstrates that everyone has different angles and perspectives on matters. Rather than taking a breather to reflect on the past and letting players come to their own conclusions, Hashino and the team were more interested in recapping the opening hours and clearly stating, people live in their echo chambers. This scene feels like the opposite of Klinger's reveal. Instead of enjoying a moment of respite, we, the players, are told how to feel for some reason. I honestly believe a moment of silence here would have spoken volumes, yet we get a recap of everything that just happened, with Stroll and Gallica concluding everyone sees the world differently. Like, yeah, no shit. Even though I may have sounded critical or would have liked to see some scenes rewritten or even removed, all things considered, I'd argue Metaphor is one of Atlus's stronger openings. The world, characters, conflict, combat, systems, and drama are gradually distilled to players in a succinct manner. Sure, there are some long cutscenes and some other minor nitpicks you can make, but this opening is more focused and better written than some of their other projects. Then again, it took me around 4 hours for the training wheels to finally come off. Listen, and I can't believe I'm saying this, after watching all 4 hours of these cutscenes, with some combat of course, there aren't many scenes that you can remove or even rewrite without the story or characters losing some of their weight. Most of these scenes provide world exposition, dialogue that keeps the plot moving, or additional characterization. Creating an engaging world and writing exceptional characters is something Atlus specializes in, and they're essential when creating an RPG. Yes, there's a lot of dialogue, and I wish it didn't take almost 4 hours to experience the core gameplay loop, but most of it, for better or for worse, is critical to the overall experience. So if this opening is actually pretty good, then why are journalists still complaining about it? To answer this question, we have to define what makes an intro compelling. When thinking about some of my favorite openings, games like Devil May Cry 4 and BioShock immediately come to mind. Highly stylized action, a sick aesthetic, Dante serving as the villain, and watching him fight with Nero passes the eye test with flying colors. The composition of these scenes, the combat's choreography, and the mystery behind Dante murdering the priest and demons being in the Holy Order are quickly established. Then again, we're talking about a character action game, and Itsuno understood this. For character action games especially, players are usually foaming at the mouth for gameplay. If you press buttons and make cool stuff happen, that's really all that we need. The second game with a strong intro that I mentioned was BioShock. On a plane flying over the Atlantic, Jack, the main character, finds himself smoking a cigarette before looking at a picture of his parents in his wallet. He talks about how his parents said he'd do great things before looking down at a gift as the screen fades to black. The sound of screaming passengers, a crash, and an explosion plays as the title screen appears. On the verge of drowning with a purse and parts of the plane plunging towards the sea floor, Jack desperately swims to the surface as he runs out of breath. Looking at the fire and wreckage, he swims towards the lighthouse with an open door. After setting foot in the building, the door closes behind him as this enormous statue with a ribbon reading, "No gods or kings, only men," greets him. With nowhere else to go, Jack makes his way down some stairs and enters this mysterious bathysphere. Pulling the lever finds him descending into the ocean as an ad plays. We see this mysterious thing called a plasmid before we're interrupted with a speech from Andrew Ryan. Andrew preaches an objectivist allegory while denouncing capitalist, religious, and communist values. Shackled by the morality bred through these systems, he created Rapture, a city where artists won't fear censorship, scientists aren't bound to morality, businesses can operate without constraint, and freedom is valued above all. He definitely chose the chaos ending. Believing we're headed towards this utopia, things quickly turn for the worst. The first thing we see is a near pitch black room with a man begging for his life before being murdered by this creature with hooks for hands. The monster jumps on the bathysphere trying to get us until a friendly voice asks,
"Would you kindly pick up that shortwave radio?"
Seeming like the only sensible option, you follow Atlus's request and leave the bathysphere. With lights flickering until they go out, we approach the splicer, the monster attacking us earlier, and they escape as this mysterious camera turret light thing shoots at them. After ingesting our first plasmid, the things we saw earlier, we pass out and wake up to splicers looking for Adam, a commodity needed to use plasmids. After fighting them off and exploring Rapture, Atlus tells us his family is stranded in Neptune's bounty and asks us to help free them. And before leaving the tutorial area, Andrew Ryan makes his grand appearance, asking us who we work for and taunts us as splicers rush the room as we escape. Now, the main character, Ryan's motivations, the city of Rapture, Atlus's motivations, immediate world building, and mysteries are introduced within like 20 minutes. The impossible odds of Rapture's genesis, Andrew Ryan's objectivist allegory, the splicers helping Atlus, and wondering how this city fell are immediately captivating. It's this impossibly immersive opening that leaves you on the edge of your seat begging for more. If you haven't played BioShock before and think it's just another shooter, would you kindly check it out if you're interested? And while it's easy to criticize Atlus and other JRPG opening hours, they have a lot more to establish and share with players than Devil May Cry 4 or BioShock. JRPGs, like I said, very much face an uphill battle comparatively. Additionally, I don't think it's possible to say just do X to fit the openings either. Each of their games have unique hurdles to cross, ranging from narrative to mechanical depth. I'd also advise against streamlining or removing mechanical depth, as it'd be at odds with RPG's core design philosophy. If these were absent, streamlined, or gutted, experimenting with several mechanics and replayability would quickly erode. So, if I were tasked with the impossible and had to provide some general recommendations here, I'd probably suggest experimenting with more show don't tell and getting players to experience the core gameplay loop as fast as possible. Writers, whether it's a script, character dialogue, a book, video essay, or a game, ride the fine line between sharing enough information and not beating you over the head with things. Obviously, this changes based on what you're trying to achieve, but there's a level of respect creatives must have for their audience or listeners. Instead of someone explaining if they're upset, a side eye, a brief glare, cutting the music, or even just a moment of silence can be deafening. Respecting the audience means placing faith in them to understand the purpose of these moments, and these moments can be left up to interpretation, which can be even more effective in my opinion. If you'd like to see some fantastic examples of this, look no further than Persona 3 Fez. In my Persona 3 Fez video, which I highly recommend checking out if you haven't, I dedicate a few minutes to this in the Art in Motion section. To make a long story short, Persona 3's opening fully embraces this show don't tell philosophy. As you watch this spectacle, your mind wanders about the town, who this girl is, and why she's trying to do this. There's also some superb visual storytelling as well, but you get the point by now. Atlus has done this in the past, and I believe leaning even further into this would really help their games. The other suggestion I proposed was getting players to the gameplay sooner. Honestly, this is pretty self-explanatory. It'd be cool if the gameplay was distilled to players as well as the story. To wrap this video up, I want to quickly talk about one of Atlus's better openings and see why it succeeded. When thinking about Atlus's best openings, SMT3 Nocturne, Persona 3, and Devil Survivor immediately come to mind. However, I'd like to discuss a more modern example of one of their better openings a lot of people forgot about, haven't played, or just don't even know exist. Now, I know I'm probably going to lose a lot of you here, so just bear with me. Released 3 years ago, riddled with numerous problems, Soul Hackers 2, unironically, is home to one of Atlus's strongest openings. Say what you will about Soul Hackers 2, but its intro is short, sweet, and to the point. Set in the 21st century where technology is plateaued and society is stagnated, a life is born through the sea of information. The camera pans on this being until we hear a voice calling it Ringo. The voice introduces itself as Ion, a conscious born from the sea of information that monitors humanity. Ion has concluded that humanity is on the brink of extinction as a catastrophic threat looms over it. To prevent this, Ringo, the main character, is provided with life to prevent it. Ion tasks two agents, Ringo and Fig, with locating the two individuals they believe will cause the apocalypse. After briefly expressing themselves, Ion provides them with comps, weapons to defend themselves, and they leave in search of them. I'm not gonna lie to you, this intro gives me Ghost in the Shell and James Bond vibes. The opening about life being born in a sea of data feels heavily inspired by Ghost in the Shell, and if providing us with a mission and gadgets doesn't feel James Bond inspired, I don't know what to tell you. After leaving wherever this is, Ringo finds herself scouting the East Shipping District for her targets with some excellent camera work. Fig informs her one of the targets has died. Searching his office for clues, Fig decrypts some data, discovering these things called covenants. Ringo proceeds to search for her target, only to find him dead. Needing information from him, Ringo attempts to revive Arrow through soul hacking. As we dive into his soul, we see flashbacks from his youth and get a chance to speak with him before reviving him. Anyways, Ringo says fight with me or die, Arrow says type shit, comes back from the dead, he can't summon his demons without Ringo's help, you fight a boss named RS, Fig gets a covenant, soul hacks Milady, the person Arrow is meant to protect, and Ringo and Fig debrief them on the situation, requesting their help. Now, just to quickly reiterate, you can say whatever you want about the quality of Soul Hackers 2, but I implore you to find another Atlus game that gives you the controller in like an hour and a half. Within like 90 minutes, the setting is established, the conflict is cemented, Ringo is introduced, her personality is developed, we meet Fig, Ion introduces our targets, Fig discovers covenants, we soul hack our entire party, and we're dropped in the first dungeon. I understand this world isn't as developed as other Atlus worlds and the story is relatively straightforward, but let's not sit here and pretend we weren't remotely interested in what just happened. Soul Hackers 2 even passes the eye test. I don't know, this may sound crazy, but I'll argue that Soul Hackers 2, ironically enough, has one of Atlus's strongest openings. So I want to be transparent with everyone before wrapping up this video. Before even writing this video or having this concept in my mind, I went into this outline with critical intentions. In the past, I've criticized Atlus's inability to open their games. I argued they were the weakest part of them and have made other remarks I wish I could take back, but I guess part of growing up is knowing when to say you're sorry. And after seriously assessing these openings against some of my favorites and identifying the scope of what they had to accomplish, I owe Atlus an apology. All their openings aren't bad, but if you couldn't tell from the length of this video, it's a much more nuanced criticism than I initially thought. Do you remember all those articles I found from journalists criticizing Metaphor's openings? Well, I flipped the question to the community and asked everyone on the Metaphor ReFantazio subreddit for their thoughts on the opening. And no, this isn't a perfect method of gathering data, but the answers were interesting nonetheless. The most upvoted response said they were fully engaged by the end of the prologue scene, but some other people said they weren't invested in the plot until reaching Brylehaven, which took me about 40 hours to get to, and honestly I can kinda relate. It's important to remember that critics and fans have different tastes and expectations, but it seems like we can all agree that Atlus's opening hours are definitely on the long side. There are undeniably recurring issues with their games which may damage overall pacing and player retention. As I said earlier, the reason Metaphor failed to grab me was due largely in part to the high fantasy setting, but I can't critically hold it against the game as it's entirely subjective. Eventually, I found myself attached to the world, characters, politics, and the drama in the universe. Just because something hooked me doesn't mean it's going to hook you. If I learned anything from this massive thought experiment that this video took me down, opening games are fucking hard, man. When critically assessing these openings, there's very little I would even change in the grand scheme of things. Whenever I criticize anything on this channel, I try to provide an alternative or some form of constructive criticism. Something I try to avoid is bashing something just because. In my opinion, it's hard to complain about something when you can't think of an alternative or a solution. And after applying this train of thought to the openings we've covered today, I don't know if it's possible to generally criticize Atlus's opening. I know I gave them 2 points of feedback earlier, but even those are equally shaky, and who knows, there could be a comment saying how bad they are. As such, I believe a critical overview of these openings must be done on a case-by-case basis, or maybe it's just a symptom of being a JRPG. To create these immersive, engaging worlds to get lost in, it takes a lot of exposition and dialogue, and I'm not sure how comfortable I'd be advising developers to rewrite or remove scenes. But hey, those are my thoughts, and I'm curious what everyone else thinks about this topic. In the future, I'm probably going to take a step back from criticizing openings and really think of ways to tighten the overall experience. Because, at the end of the day, there's no band-aid solution to this problem, and I think Atlus is doing a much better job than a lot of us give them credit for. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. You can probably hear that I'm pretty tired, so I'm going to keep this short, but before I go, big shout out to the domain dwellers for supporting all my creative endeavors. Without them, none of these videos would be possible, and if you would like to join this illustrious list of incredible people, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming either a channel member or subscribing on Twitch, where you'll receive early video access, a special Discord role, access to my scripts, outlines, emotes, and more. Also, feel free to join the Discord where we talk about pretty much everything from games games to TV to music to anime, it is all there. And also, if you want to catch the show live, I do stream here. I stream on Twitch as well. And if you want to catch all the past live streams, you can find them in the past live streams playlist if you want to watch some VODs and just hang out. And they're here so I don't just flood your guys' sub boxes, because that'd be pretty bad. This video, I initially thought it was going to be much more negative, but I don't know, the more I thought about it and the more I wrote and the more I consulted with others and spoke with other people and just kind of read about what goes into a good intro and kind of looked at some videos that I wrote and some other of my favorite books or just TV shows or anime. I don't know, I realized this whole subject is highly subjective and it's very complicated. Like the fact that I even thought for a second that I could make like a compelling video about this, I don't know, pretty ambitious. It's a very complicated and nuanced subject. So yeah, I'm really curious to see the comments and know everybody's thoughts on this video. What are your favorite intros? Not Atlus related, but just intros in general. Like what games, what books, what movies, what TV shows, what pilots just come to your mind and you're like, oh my god, this is really good. And conversely, what are some of your least favorites? Have you put down an Atlus game because it took too long to get going before? Do you think all of Atlus's games suffer from the slow intros? And if you were put in the editor's seat or the director's seat and you could make some changes to the Atlus's openings, what would you do? I'm really curious, and I think it's a hard question to answer, honestly. So anyways, I know you can hear it in my voice, so I'm gonna get out of here, go get some sleep, go finish editing this video, and I will catch you guys in the next one, whether that's a video or a stream. Have a great day, evening, morning, or night.